I need to tell you something before I tell you what he did. I saw the paperwork problem 3 weeks before our wedding, and I signed the marriage license application anyway. 4 months later, we closed on a house together, joint ownership papers signed as husband and wife, $340,000 of mortgage resting on a marriage certificate the county had stamped and filed. That's when the clerk's office called and told me the marriage never actually existed, which meant as far as the county was concerned, neither did the loan we'd just signed our names to. I'm Farah. I'm 29. And this is the story of how I found out I wasn't legally married to my own husband 4 months after the wedding and 3 days after we bought a house believing I was. We rented a little 2-bedroom before the wedding, the kind of place with a leaky faucet neither of us ever fixed because we both knew we'd be moving soon enough. Desmond cooked most nights, actually good at it, not just competent, the kind of good that makes you show up to dinner on time. We used to sit on the balcony after feet up on the railing making lists of furniture we wanted for the house we hadn't found yet. I would have told you without a second's hesitation that I knew this man completely. Turns out there's a difference between knowing someone and knowing everything they've left unfinished. I work as a process server and skip tracer for a small legal firm outside Phoenix. It's not glamorous work. I locate people who don't want to be located, for court summonses, for debt collectors, for lawyers who need somebody served papers before a filing deadline expires. I spend my days pulling court records, cross-referencing addresses, confirming that the person standing in front of me is actually who a document says they are. I've served papers to men who swore up and down they were somebody else entirely, right up until the moment I handed them the envelope with their real name on it. I never once thought I'd need those exact same skills on my own husband. That's the kind of thing you say out loud months later, half laughing, half not, because in the moment you're living it, it never once occurs to you that the job following you home might end up being the thing that saves you. Desmond and I met at a mutual friend's barbecue 2 years before the wedding. He made me laugh within the first 5 minutes, the genuinely funny kind, not the trying too hard kind, and that was mostly it for me. He worked in commercial insurance, dressed sharp, called his mother every Sunday like clockwork. He'd been married before briefly in his late 20s, a fact he mentioned early and often always the same 3 sentences. Young a mistake over quickly, no hard feelings on either side. I never had a reason to ask for more than that. People get divorced. It's not a red flag by itself. I didn't know yet that over quickly and over were 2 very different claims, and that only one of them was actually true. I didn't act on the paperwork thing right away. 3 weeks before the wedding, filling out our own marriage license application at the county courthouse, I noticed Desmond's old divorce decree required paperwork standard stuff, had a case number that looked to my very trained eye incomplete. Not wrong exactly. Just missing a closing entry I'd have expected to see on a fully finalized case, the kind of small procedural gap I flag for a living when I'm pulling records for work. I remember standing at that courthouse counter, staring at it for a few seconds too long, and then telling myself it was probably just an older filing format, a clerical thing, nothing that mattered. I signed my part of the application. I didn't ask Desmond about it. Not that day, not that week. Not once in the 3 weeks between then and the wedding. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. You usually see the edge of it long before you see the whole shape, and the smallest piece of it is always small enough to talk yourself out of. Especially when a wedding is 3 weeks away, and 400 people already have the date on their calendar. I actually mentioned the case number to a coworker the next day casually at my desk, the kind of thing I'd flag on any other file without thinking twice. She glanced at it for 2 seconds and said, "Could just be an old scanning format. Some counties never updated their systems." That was all the permission I needed to stop looking. I wanted an easy answer so badly I took the first one somebody handed me. Even though some part of me, the part that's good at this job specifically because it doesn't take easy answers, already knew it wasn't quite right. The complicating moment came at the reception itself, of all places. Desmond's Aunt Marlene stood up during toasts a little loose from champagne and said, laughing, "Well, the first time's never the charm." But Desmond finally got it right. The room laughed along with her, the easy kind of laugh a room gives a slightly tipsy aunt at a wedding. I laughed too. I remember thinking in the moment that it was just a joke about his first marriage being short and forgettable. I had no idea yet how literally true that sentence actually was, that in the eyes of the county, Desmond hadn't gotten a first time at all yet. Legally, in that room on that dance floor, there was still only one marriage on the books with his name on it, and it wasn't the one everyone had just watched him promise forever to. The escalation started with a phone call I almost didn't pick up. It came in on a Tuesday afternoon while I was between appointments sitting in my car outside a strip mall waiting to serve papers to a guy who ran a tax office. Ordinary day, ordinary week, radio on low. I almost sent it to voicemail, unfamiliar number area code I didn't recognize, but something made me pick up. I need you to understand something before I keep going, because it matters for everything after this. I didn't start pulling records because I stopped loving him, or because I went looking for a reason to blow up a marriage 4 months old. I started because a woman who verifies other people's paperwork for a living cannot get a call from a county clerk using the word discrepancy about her own marriage certificate and just let it go unanswered. The clerk on the phone was careful professional, clearly used to delivering news nobody wants. She explained that a routine audit tied to our mortgage closing had flagged an issue. Desmond's prior divorce, filed 6 years earlier, had never actually been finalized. A required filing fee on the final decree had gone unpaid. The case had quietly stalled in the system, and it had simply sat there technically open for 6 full years, while Desmond had spent every one of those years telling anyone who asked that it was long since finished. I didn't confront him that night. I did what I do for a living instead. I pulled the case file myself using my firm's court access, the same access I use every week to confirm somebody's marital status before I serve them papers in a custody case. The file was exactly what the clerk described, open stalled, one unpaid fee away from ever being closed, and listed as the still legal spouse of record, a woman named Whitney Osei, maiden name restored on later filings, last known address, in a suburb 40 minutes from where Desmond and I had just closed on our house. I sat with that for 2 full days before I told a single person, including Desmond. I went to work. I served papers to strangers calm as anything, while quietly building the shape of my own case file at night, cross-referencing Whitney's current address, her employer, anything I could confirm the same way I'd confirm it for a client. I remember sitting at our kitchen table one of those nights, laptop open, Desmond, asleep down the hall, running a background search on my own husband's legal history, like he was any other name that had crossed my desk that week. There's a particular kind of loneliness in investigating your own marriage, using the exact tools you use to investigate other people's lives. Nobody warns you about that part. I need you to know something before I go further, because it recontextualizes everything I've told you up to here. The paperwork glitch I noticed 3 weeks before our wedding wasn't a glitch. It was the exact document that would have told me everything if I'd let myself actually read it instead of just signing my part and moving on with the day. For the next few days, I kept building instead of confronting. I found Whitney's current job, a school administrator 40 minutes away, and I found buried in an old county newspaper archive an engagement announcement from 3 years back, her name paired with someone else's, a wedding that, as far as she knew, had happened after her divorce from Desmond, was long since final. She had no reason to think otherwise. Nobody had ever told her the paperwork never actually closed. I almost drove to her school one afternoon, sat in the parking lot for a full 20 minutes with the engine running, watching kids get picked up by the carpool line before I talked myself out of it. Showing up unannounced at a stranger's job felt like a line I wasn't ready to cross yet, not until I had the actual certified file in my hands instead of a patchwork of court databases and old newspaper clippings. So I drove home instead and told myself I'd get the real thing first. I drove out to the county archive building myself the following Monday, the same kind of building I've walked into 100 times for work, and pulled the full certified case file, every filing, every stamp, every gap. I sat in my car in the parking lot for almost 10 minutes before I went in, not because I was scared, but because I wanted to be completely sure of every date before I let this become real. I've learned doing this job that you don't walk into a confrontation with a hunch. You walk in with a file that can survive somebody trying to argue with it. Inside, the clerk handed me the certified copy page by page, and there it was in plain, unglamorous government language. Case opened 6 years ago prior. Final decree drafted signed by the judge sitting in the file. Filing fee for record closure, never paid. Case status to this day, open. Whitney O.C. and Desmond had never technically stopped being married on paper in the eyes of the state of Arizona for 6 straight years, through his entire relationship with me, through our wedding, through the mortgage we'd just signed as husband and wife. I stood at that counter rereading the final page 3 times, waiting for it to say something different the 4th time. It didn't. Government paperwork doesn't change because you want it to. No matter how many times you read it, that's actually the whole reason I trust it more than I trust people most days. I drove home holding that folder like it might combust in the passenger seat windows down, even though it wasn't particularly warm out, just needing the air moving around me for the entire 40-minute drive back. That evening, I set the folder down on our kitchen table, the same table where we'd signed our mortgage paperwork 4 months earlier, coffee mugs pushed to one side the lender's pen, still sitting in the drawer where we'd tossed it after. Desmond looked at the folder for a long moment before he even opened it, like some part of him already knew exactly what it was going to say. His hands were steady right up until he actually started reading. Then I watched them go still on the table's edge, fingers flat pressed down hard enough that his knuckles went pale, like he was trying to hold the whole kitchen in place around him. He didn't reach for the folder again after that first read. He just left his hands exactly where they were, like moving them might make the next part worse. "I meant to finish it," he said. Finally, voice low. "Years ago. There was a fee, some paperwork, and then Whitney and I stopped talking and it sat there. I told myself it didn't matter. It was done in every way that mattered. It mattered legally, Desmond. It mattered to the bank we just signed a mortgage with. I know that now, obviously sitting here." He rubbed a hand across his jaw, not quite looking at me. "I don't have a good answer for why I let it go this long. I don't think there is one." He didn't argue that part. That was almost the worst piece of it. No denial, no anger. Just a man staring at his own hands like he genuinely couldn't explain even to himself how 6 years had passed without a $200 filing fee getting paid. "My dad never finished anything either," he said quietly, almost to himself. I think some part of me just didn't want to be the guy who actually followed through and admitted it had failed. Filing that last piece felt like signing my name to failing at something, so I just didn't. For 1 second, just one, I saw exactly why he'd let it sit. A man so afraid of admitting one failure clearly that he'd let it metastasize into a much bigger one quietly for 6 years without ever meaning for it to reach this far. And then that second passed, and I was just furious again, sitting at a table where we'd signed a mortgage under a marriage that on paper had never legally existed. I asked him once why he never told me any of it. Not the open case, not the unpaid fee, not even a version of the truth softened enough to make it easier to hear. He didn't have a real answer for that, either. "I think I was scared that if I said it out loud to you, it would become real," he said. As long as nobody said it, it just kind of wasn't happening. I understood the logic of that, even as I hated it. I've spent my whole career proving that nothing stays not happening forever, just because nobody's said it out loud yet. I want to tell you it ended there, clean and complete, at that kitchen table. It didn't. What ended there was the version of Desmond I was willing to give the benefit of the doubt without a fight. What came after took longer, and it wasn't the part I expected to hurt the most. It wasn't until the following week that I actually called Whitney myself, using the number I'd found through my own work channels weeks earlier and never used. I almost didn't. I sat with my phone in my hand for a solid 10 minutes, thumb hovering over the call button, telling myself it wasn't my business to blow up her life the way mine had just been blown up. But I kept thinking about that engagement announcement about a woman who'd built 3 more years of her life on paperwork she had every reason to believe was closed the same way I had. She picked up on the second ring, and when I explained who I was and why I was calling, There was a long, stunned silence on the other end, long enough that I actually pulled the phone away from my ear to check the call hadn't dropped. "He told me the finalization went through the same month we split," she said, finally her voice tight. "I got remarried myself 2 years ago. Common law mostly we never actually filed because I always figured why rush the paperwork twice. I had no idea there was ever anything left open on my end at all. We stayed on the phone almost 40 minutes after that, 2 women comparing notes on a man neither of us had ever fully known, filling in each other's blanks. She told me about their marriage quick and young, ending quietly with what she'd believed was a clean split. I told her about the mortgage, the reception, Marlene's toast. Somewhere around minute 31 of us actually laughed, a short, disbelieving kind of laugh at the sheer absurdity of it. 2 brides, 6 years apart, both technically married to the same unfinished man. That call cracked something open that hadn't cracked yet, even after the kitchen table. It wasn't just my marriage sitting on unfinished paperwork. It was hers too, resting on the exact same unpaid fee for exactly as long without either of us ever knowing the other existed on the other side of it. I filed the paperwork to formally close Desmond's original case myself the following week, using the same court system I use every day for work, partly because I understood the process better than anyone, and partly because I needed for my own sanity to be the one who finally finished what he'd left sitting open for 6 years. There's something almost funny about that, if I let myself see it that way. The woman he lied to for 6 years being the one who finally walked his paperwork across the finish line he couldn't manage himself. Whitney filed the closing fee on her end the same week, a small, strange kind of solidarity between 2 women who'd never met before, a phone call neither of us wanted to make. Desmond and I are separated now, working through what an annulment actually looks like for a marriage that technically the state says never fully existed to begin with, which is its own strange kind of paperwork closing something that was never properly open. The house is still in both our names for now, an unglamorous tangle neither of us has the energy to sort out yet. His lawyer and mine have been trading emails for weeks about how you even divide equity in a home bought under a marriage that legally wasn't one, and nobody, including 2 actual attorneys, seems entirely sure of the answer. My mom asked me last week if I regret not asking him about the case number that day at the courthouse. I've turned that question over more times than I can count. The honest answer is, I don't know if asking would have changed anything. Desmond might have had the same easy explanation ready either way, the same, it doesn't matter. It's basically done answer. He clearly believed himself for 6 years. But I know I would have felt less like a bystander in my own life if I'd at least said the question out loud instead of swallowing it because a wedding date was already circled on 400 calendars. At the courthouse, the day we filed our original license application, Desmond had joked with the clerk while he signed his section easy and light. "Paperwork's the easy part, right?" I remember laughing along with him at the time. No idea that the very form he was signing next to mine already had a problem folded inside it waiting. Turns out paperwork wasn't the easy part after all. It was the part that was going to tell me everything months before he ever did. I just wasn't ready yet to actually read it.